Hello, and welcome to Cutting Through. I'm Mitchell Plitnick. It is time to really take a look and take stock of the fact that the United States and possibly Israel are about to attack Iran. And we have to ask the question of why. What is the reason? Why is this happening? I think we can pretty easily dispense with the idea that it has anything to do with helping the Iranian people. Um, I think if you believe that, you are hopelessly naive. Uh, and might as well stop listening now because you're clinging to notions that just have no basis in reality. There is no reason to think that there is any, even the slightest concern, either in the halls of the Knesset or in the White House, for the well-being of the people of Iran. They may use rhetoric that reflects certain aspects of that, but the reality is plain for all to see. We saw it well enough when Israel attacked Iran last June. Let's remember the strikes on Iran's nuclear facility were American strikes. Israel's attacks almost entirely targeted civilians. Um, the various times that the Iranian people have engaged in mass protest before this last one, they got you know self-serving and otherwise meaningless words and empty rhetoric from the rest of the world, not just the U.S. and Israel. Um, and the sanctions regime has done, almost nothing to really hurt the Islamic Republic. Just its citizens have been decimated by sanctions, international and particularly U.S. sanctions. So we can do away with that idea. The the next excuse that's given is the nuclear weapons issue. I want to put that aside for a minute. I'm going to talk in the bulk of this video about that issue, but I want to put that aside for just a minute because that's one of three basic demands that the U.S. has put on the table with Iran. The other two are Iran's ballistic missile program and its use of proxy militias, if you will, or I think the more fair way to describe it is allied militias that Iran supports throughout the region. The amount, the extent to which those are actually servants, quote unquote, or of the Iranian regime is vastly overstated in the West. When you can look at a group like Hezbollah, which certainly has done quite a bit to support Iranian interests throughout the region, just as Israel has done quite a bit to support American interests throughout the region over the years. That doesn't mean that they are essentially agents of Iran. Hezbollah is primarily a Lebanese Shia organization, and that is where their primary interest lies. And that's a similar case for the Houthis, Nasrallah in Yemen, and other smaller groups that Iran supports in the region. The thing about those two things is that those two factors are the reason there hasn't already been a massive attack on Iran. The reason that the United States and Israel go to the lengths that they do to prepare themselves and to prepare their forces before launching an attack, we're seeing this massive buildup of air power around Iran by the United States. It's telling that one thing the United States is not massing is ground troops. So they intend to conduct an air campaign very clearly, and maybe an extended one. It may just go on bombing and bombing and bombing. And what they are preparing, both themselves and the Israelis and probably some other allied countries in the region, they're preparing for the potential that Iran strikes back using their allied militias throughout the region, may strike back at U.S. targets. They may strike back at Israel. They may strike back at other American allies, particularly in the Persian Gulf, in the oil fields, etc. And they are right now preparing for the Iranian response that may come, or that will come if they launch such an attack. The missile program in particular is of concern to both Israel and the powerful Gulf Arab nations because that is how Iran would attack uh, um, oil fields, and hope thereby to disrupt the global economy in response to an attack on its sovereign territory, or would retaliate against Israel. They demonstrated last year that they can, uh, with their missile technology, bypass or get through Israel's air defenses. Although, Israel will certainly intercept many, they will not be able to intercept all, even with the resources of the United States and other Arab allies on their side. And you have to remember that that was an attack that Iran intentionally calibrated to limit the level of damage that they were doing. This time, they have made it clear, and I think we should take them at their word, that all bets are off as far as that goes, that they will retaliate for real, something they have not done in the past. So those are really the key issues. Those are really the ones that the United States and Israel are worried about. It's not the nuclear question. Why is it not the nuclear? How can we say that? I mean, my God, what would happen if Iran actually had a nuclear weapon? It would be very dangerous. I think it would be very dangerous. It's very dangerous that Israel has an undeclared nuclear arsenal that can destroy the world. Um, I think it's very dangerous that only one country has ever used a nuclear weapon, and that one country is the boss of the world, which is the United States. Is the one country that everybody is worried about and catering to. That's very dangerous. It's very dangerous that any country has nuclear weapons. Would Iran's danger pose an even greater threat? I think so. I think it would turn up the tension in the region. It would certainly trigger an arms race, a nuclear arms race, with countries like Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has, in fact, already made it clear that that is their intention. If Iran ever gets a nuclear weapon, that they would pursue one themselves, and very likely, as unpopular as the Saudis may be in Washington and in popular circles, I dare say they will get support, significant support, and probably majority bipartisan support in pursuing a nuclear weapon should Iran ever get one. The thing is, Iran's not trying to get one. Okay, and this is where everything gets lost. This is where we are really facing something like Iraq too. Again, the difference is the dimension of the ground invasion, but a sustained bombing campaign that does not lead to regime change or does not get to the targets that the United States chooses, may then lead to a ground invasion. We don't know. We don't know where that will go. And so we're looking at a potentially sustained campaign again based on a falsehood. So how do we know it's a falsehood? Well, we go to U.S. intelligence, um, which has said, and I think quite clearly, since 2007, the first national intelligence estimate in 2007 that said Iran had abandoned its pursuit of a nuclear weapon. Every subsequent national intelligence assessment, including the one last year by Trump's own director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, concluded the same thing. They have not decided to pursue a nuclear weapon. Now, there's some ambiguity in there because Iran has taken steps that one could certainly interpret as being as moving towards a nuclear weapon. I mean, they are in fact moving towards a nuclear weapon, but they have not taken the decision to actually pursue one, and that has been true since 2003. So we're talking a good long time already. One thing people point to is the fact that the supreme leader issued a fatwa against weapons of mass destruction, and I think we could, and that's all well and good. I don't know that anybody puts much stock in religious decrees of any kind. Yeah, I mean, I can certainly understand skepticism around that, although it's a lot more, I mean, if that turns out to be nothing but an illusion, that would undermine not only the Iranian supreme leader, but Iran's position as a leader in the Shiite world to such a degree that it's just not worth it. There's better ways to go about uh, ensuring that people believe you're not pursuing a nuke. Um, so yeah, but I understand that skepticism. So let's look at things that are have nothing to do with religious decrees. Um, the U.S. intelligence maintains that Iran's not currently producing nuclear weapons, but has engaged in activity that shortened the path to a bomb. This is what I've been, have been saying. So how does that come about? Why have they engaged in activities that shorten the path to a bomb? Very simply, because the United States abandoned the Iran nuclear deal. Because while that deal was in place, Iran was not engaging in activities that shortened the path to a bomb. They were complying with every piece of the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal. This was confirmed by Trump officials in during his first term, including his Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis, in congressional testimony, and was confirmed by Israeli intelligence, European intelligence, and our own intelligence here in the United States. There is no question that when that deal was in place, Iran was abiding by it. We were the ones that were actually not fully implementing the deal. We were supposed to not just lift sanctions, but encourage investment. Instead, we put out rhetoric talking about how untrustworthy Iran was and how dangerous Iran would be, and thereby discouraged investment in the country, which considerably slowed its economic recovery while the JCPOA was in place. Um, in response, when after Trump unilaterally abrogated this deal and broke, just basically completely crushed the concept that the United States would abide by any sort of international agreement, no one, it absolutely. I mean, there were reasons, of course, to trust not to trust that the United States would abide by treaties it signs. Just ask any Native American, but. Um, it had never been quite so brazen, quite so clear, and had never been uh, a commitment that the United States made with its closest European partners. This was a deal that was not just the United States, but it was the so-called P5 plus one, the five permanent members of the Security Council plus Germany that made this deal, and the United States just dumped it. And once that happened, and we went back to a really tough sanctions regime and pursued the policy of maximum pressure, which, let us be clear, Trump began and Joe Biden absolutely continued. This notion that Joe Biden broke from that policy is false. He did not. He maintained it, and Trump has, if anything, intensified it since he got back into office. The only way outside of violence which is a dead end for Iran. Iran is not; these are not stupid people. They have not that government, the Islamic Republic, has not endured for 4.5 decades because they're stupid. Okay, they have endured because they know what they're doing. They understand when they're overmatched. They know they can't defeat the United States with violence. They may have ways, things that they can accomplish with small degrees of violence. This is what the allied militias are when they're working with Iranian intelligence and thinking about Iranian interests, this is what they're doing. But that's not a way that you're going to win any sort of encounter. They are not looking, and still today are not looking for a fight with the United States. They know who wins an all-out war. I mean, they may be able to give the United States a bloody nose in that fight, but they know they have no chance of actually winning through force of arms. So what could they do? Well, they could say, you have abrogated this deal and you have gone back to these crippling sanctions. So we are not going to abide by our side. And they very, very gradually went past the limits of uranium enrichment. They gradually diminished access to international inspectors. This was all negotiating tactic because it was the only thing that the Iranians had. And so that is what they did. Um, as a result, they had they did, continue to increase their stockpile of enriched uranium, 60% enriched uranium, which is more than is necessary for any civilian use, but doesn't quite get to the grade. It's the one step below. The next step is nuclear weapons grade enrichment, and they're staying there. When the United States struck the Iranian nuclear facilities last year, Trump made a big deal about how he had completely obliterated Iran's nuclear capabilities. Anyone paying any attention knew it was a lie at the time, but people are, particularly our rather spineless media in this country, our mainstream media anyway, are reluctant and even loath to call the president a liar. So they reported it, sometimes with a small degree of skepticism, but the reality was that all they did was set back, which is what most of us who are following the issue said would happen. They set back the Iranian nuclear program by a matter of months. It was not anything like the complete obliteration that Trump liked to put out there. But again, the result was that Iran continued to reduce its cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency. It made it very, very difficult to track exactly what Iran's been doing since then. This is exactly what we warned was going to happen if you abrogate the JCPOA. It's elementary, of course. When you have a deal where you had unprecedented access, the international community, the IA and the IAEA had unprecedented access to Iran's nuclear facilities, access that they don't have in other countries that are also signatories to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Which we should always remember in the context of these conversations, Israel is not. Israel is the one with an illicit nuclear weapons program. We should not be forgetting that. It is certainly dealing with that is one way of dealing with the entire question of Iran. But okay, that's already getting into things that are beyond the scope of reality as we sit here now. But you have this, you have a situation where we can't monitor very well what Iran's doing. That being said, if there was significant nuclear activity since last June, we'd know if it was really serious. And we know that there hasn't been. We know that there hasn't been. Iran is not pursuing, and let me state this as clearly as I can. Iran is not pursuing a nuclear weapon. It's clear they're not. It is clear to anyone who really looks at all the facts that is not. And so why do we want to bomb Iran? So the simplistic and I think glib answer is a fairly typical one. Well, we're doing it for Israel because Israel essentially runs American foreign policy. It's nonsense. Okay, it's always been nonsense. It's still nonsense. Of course, Israel has undue influence, unusual influence. There is a special relationship. There's special sympathy for Israel. There is still a belief in Washington that Israel is our vanguard and our outpost in the sea of Arab barbarity in the Middle East. There is still, all of that racism tied up and all of that short-sighted foreign policy thinking still there in Washington, still there as on a bipartisan basis, even though more and more people are seeing through it. This is certainly certainly Israel's concerns and interests are part of this. Let's be very clear, though. In terms of, for example, Palestinian militant groups, Iran is no longer a factor in that. There's really no way for Iran to smuggle any real help into even the West Bank, let alone Gaza. There's just no way for them to do it, because the main way that that weapons and that sort of thing got into those areas was through Syria and through Lebanon. And those avenues are closed, simply closed now, absolutely closed in Syria. Yeah, the Syrian government is not disposed at all to tolerate that sort of thing. They're trying to get in good with Washington, and um, even the opposition, the major opposition forces that are left in Syria are not sympathetic to Iran at all. In fact, most of them are anti-Assadists who hate Iran for their support of Assad for all those years. Similarly, in Lebanon, Hezbollah has been dramatically weakened and largely driven away from the south, which means that they are miles and miles and miles away from the Israeli border. There's just no way for Iran to provide the sort of help that they were given to Palestinian militant groups. But much of the geostrategic thinking in the region revolves around two major military parties, one much more major than the other being Israel, but and the secondary and much weaker one being Iran. Iran is still a thorn in Israel's side, so Israeli concerns are definitely involved here. But this is about the U.S. and has always been about the U.S. From the day the Iranian students took over the U.S. embassy in Tehran in 1979, the hatred for Iran in this country has been visceral. We can talk, and reasonable people understand why there was such animosity towards the United States, because we had literally gone and deposed their democratically elected governor in 1950, leader in 1953, and replaced that person, Mohammad Mossadegh, with the Shah, Reza Pahlavi, uh, and replaced and ushered in a dictatorship that lasted until the years of the revolution. I mean, in the end, I don't think that Iran was necessarily any better off with the Islamic Republic than they were under the Shah. But one thing we can say for sure is that none of it would have happened without the U.S. interfering in Iran's democratic process in the 50s. So yeah, there was a lot of animosity in 1979 towards the United States, and but Americans weren't thinking about that. All they thought about was they saw their hostages in Tehran, and it generated enormous hatred of Iranians. Um, and that's been a motivating factor. Plus, you had for many years the Saudi Iranian rivalry when Barack Obama uh, um, proposed the Iran nuclear deal during his time in office, as dead set against it as Israel was. The Saudis were possibly, I think, were arguably even more upset about it and even more angry about it. They didn't have the venues to express their opposition publicly the way the Israelis do in the United States. But the Saudis were absolutely dead set against it. Now, the Saudi stance has somewhat changed, although there is still a great deal of mistrust and rivalry between them and Iran. There are, but I think also, when it comes, we're talking here about Donald Trump. We are not talking about a rational leader. You cannot apply realist foreign policy principles to Donald Trump. You just can't. It would be, I think if you try to do that, you're being very foolish, because and you're not taking into account that Donald Trump himself is an anomaly. There are people in his administration who are more typical foreign policy thinking, because there's somebody like Marco Rubio, who's a neoconservative, and you can think about him in terms of the same sort of people that got us into the mess in Iraq. His foreign policy thinking is not dissimilar to those people, although there are details that are different. But his foreign policy thinking, but Trump's foreign policy is ego driven. And it has been said and reported on recently, he wants to be known as the person that finally did away with the Islamic Republic. this country that supporters of Saudi Arabia, supporters of Israel, supporters of a strong strong interventionist U.S. foreign policy, Iran stands in the way of those things. Iran is the enemy. We have always opposed Iran. We supported Iraq during the Iran-Iraq War, although we also practiced what would later be called a policy of dual containment. We know that we were supporting, on the one hand, Saddam Hussein. We also know that there was clandestine support, the whole Iran-Contra scandal, where we were also giving weapons to Iran. And, of course, that was about, keeping those two countries fighting each other. There's a lot there. This is not, um, it's not so simple as to say this is about Israel. But what it is about right now that we need to be concerned about is this point about the Iran's ballistic missiles and Iran's support of other militias in the region. Without those two things, Iran is essentially defenseless in the face of the United States and Israel. They have no defense. There is no chance, and I want to be really clear about this. There is not a chance in hell that Iran is going to back down on those two issues. They can't. It would literally be national suicide for their government to do that. They simply can't do it. Um, and that seems to be the direction that the United States is going. If the United States wants to get out of this, there's an easy way to do it, and you do it around the nuclear issue, because on the nuclear issue, Iran is probably going to be willing to make some significant compromises, even to going so far. They've already put out there that they'd be willing to consider, not even enriching uranium for civilian purposes for a certain period of time, 5 years or a certain period of time. They're not committing to doing that forever, but they'd be willing to say, we won't do it. We'll suspend that practice for a while. They'd be willing, I think, to go back to the intrusive inspections that were going on before Trump tore up the JCPOA. I think they would be willing to go to great lengths because, very simply, they're not pursuing a nuclear weapon. And I don't think they love the idea that they have to be held to this much of a different standard than every other country in the world, but they are staring down the barrel of some pretty big American guns. So I think they would be willing. So that's the off ramp. Is actually the nuclear issue. The thing that supporters of a strike on Iran claim is the reason for the strike is actually the off ramp. It's the place that Iran will probably be willing to compromise. But I can tell you right now, if the United States continues to assert that it insists on Iran essentially not completely giving up necessarily their ballistic missile program, but severely limiting it, and ends its support for um, militias throughout the region, that Iran can't do that. They will not do it. They won't do it. There's no hope. And I'm sure Trump may not understand it, but somebody like Marco Rubio and other folks in Trump's circle very well understand that if they stick to that, that means they're going to war. And we should all be very, very worried about what that will lead to. The results are entirely unpredictable. And, again, at least with Iraq, when that was done, the neoconservatives, this idea of democracy, spreading democracy, that was always nonsense. But, you saw in their clean break paper, their idea that if they could eliminate Iraq and then later Iran, those governments, then they could have a Middle East that was dominated by American proxies, specifically Israel, that would work in effective partnership, even if it was unstated at that time, with Saudi Arabia and other Gulf Arab states. That was the thinking. What the goal? I mean, there really is no clear goal in the current American plan. We don't know if they're, really gearing up to try and, if they're going to bomb Iran until there's regime change. Do they want to change the regime, or do they want to just change the top leadership of this regime, as they did in Venezuela, where they left the regime in place, but took out Maduro or kidnapped Maduro. I'm sure they're not going to try to kidnap the supreme leader. They may try to kill him. And there have been hints that they've drawn up a kill list of top Iranian leaders who they think if they take them out, perhaps what will be left will be more pliant, more open to dealing with the United States. Who knows? Um, but it isn't clear what they're trying to do. What is clear is that if Iran retaliates with no restraint, and and let's be clear, they have responded with restraint up until now. They have warned Israel of incoming attacks. They have warned the United States of incoming attacks. Their attack on the American base in the Persian Gulf that they did last year. They warned the United States ahead of that. They warned Israel before launching missiles. Now, that's not to say that they were trying to be nice people and it was all pretend. I mean, there was clearly damage done and lives lost, in Israel at least. So, let's not put it that way. But they clearly restrained themselves and they clearly mitigated their attack to not escalate things. They're not going to do that this time because they know that if America um, starts their bombing campaign, they're not going to stop until they get the regime change they want. So um, that's the risk. The reward is really unclear because even if the United States topples the Iranian government, there's no clear successor government. There's nothing, this first of all, toppling this government would require a land invasion. That's number one. Um, but even just damaging it and taking out its top leadership, you're opening the door to potential civil war and chaos within Iran that nobody is going to serve nobody and is going to spread throughout the region. Not to mention the fact that if they do kill Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, then you're not just talking about killing Iran's leader. You're talking about killing somebody who's seen as a spiritual leader to Shia Muslims throughout the world and certainly throughout the Middle East. Um, the reaction to that is going to be severe. You will see. I mean, you won't. Iran won't have to activate allied militias. There will be plenty of popular call for it. So, I mean, the risks here are enormous, and the potential rewards seem quite minimal. And so, we have, as citizens, every reason to try and urge our leadership to oppose any war, something that Democrats have been, to say the least, quite meek about so far. And sticking to questions of process about the president's power to wage war versus the fact that the Constitution gives that power to Congress, et cetera, et cetera. That's not what this is about. That's one argument that's fine to be made, but we should also be talking about the fact that the war, even if Congress did declare it, would still be illegal. We are simply attacking another country that has not attacked us. Quite simply, it is as illegal a war as you can get. It is as potentially destructive and pointless a war as you can get. In every way, this is a crazy idea. And the fact that it's not just, looking like it might happen, but looking quite likely should be giving Americans as much chills as anything I can think of. So I leave it there. But please do, if you're of a mind to write your member of Congress or call them or whatever and tell them to oppose this war. And also, if you can support this channel, on your screen are ways that you can do that. And we can keep bringing you these videos and articles and insights that you're not getting in other places. So leaving it there, and we'll talk to you soon.